Hey everyone! I guess a lot of us indie devs have been quite naive when we started out our projects. At least I feel that I was, even though I've not been completely unexperienced. When I was a lot younger, I've always been active as a wannabe indie dev. For instance, trying to create my own futuristic MOBA with the Warcraft 3 editor, spending countless of hours with the RPG Maker, being part of different indie teams as a 3D modeler, or when I approached the idea of creating different browser games multiple times. But still, despite being part of so many projects, I feel that I made some mistakes when planning out our current project Kingsblood. And I feel that I now have a much better grasp and understanding on what often went wrong in terms of project management and how to improve on it. But more on that later. So let's start out how Kingsblood started. 12 months ago, as I walked down a river, I kept dreaming and fantasizing about my perfect game. I started out with some passionate first devlogs and managed to bait a couple of my best friends into this journey, and instead of starting small, we decided to create a massive game with tons of features, characters, funny dialogues, etc. Basically everything I wanted to see in a super cool game, which I would really enjoy. Well, the mission itself still stands. We want to create a massive game, but the idea how we should approach it has completely changed. At the beginning, we had a massive list of features which kept growing and growing, and we basically started out with working on everything pretty much at the same time. As an example, and this was especially me who was stubborn in that regard, we created a list of all the playable characters with all the special attacks. And then instead of just implementing a couple of them, I started creating all of them, all of the characters, with all the animations, and basically started implementing most of the special attacks all at the same time. This led not only to a situation where a lot of them are very raw and unpolished, but also led to a situation of kind of a bit of a frustration, as I was doing the same task for weeks without the confirmation or assuring that what I did was good or worth the time. So I pretty much worked down my bucket list and created one character after another. This might work for smaller games that you basically work down your bucket list, but for vast and large games, if you try to create the one big final version from start to end, you might burn out, or you might create a massive system. When you playtest it might just be bad and won't be usable, so you wasted a lot of time because you didn't test it earlier. The alternative is that if you create a massive system, because you spend so much time, leave it in the game, and that might even be worse because it makes your game worse. We currently try to shift away from this approach and try to go for iteration cycles of a minimal viable game. This means we currently try to create a first small playable version instead of finishing everything at once. If something in this minimal version is bad, we can quickly modify it and go into the next development cycle. The problem about the term minimal viable game though is, when is a game a minimal viable game? We had the discussion in our team when I had learned about this concept, and I at first wanted to cut out a lot of our really fun mechanics, like our construction menu in our hideout and so on, just in order to finish a first demo as fast as possible. But then I had to realize cutting out every feature does not result in a minimal viable or lovable product, but rather a minimal hateable product. So until at least we got a minimal lovable game, it will still take some time. So I really feel even if you work towards a small demo and then you try to iterate over it in cycles and expand it, you still should invest a lot of work into creating your first demo set in a way that a lot of the features are already contained. Else it can really backfire and you create something people don't enjoy, and that might frustrate you even more. But how will we approach our minimal lovable game instead now? Instead of cutting out too many features, we rather want to cut out content. For instance, our goal currently is to create a minimal version, and in this version you will have only 2 cities accessible to interact with. You will get a couple of missions from each city, you can get some rewards, combat will be mostly functional, and then you will be able to end the demo after playing through a dungeon. There will be some random loot, leveling works, we balance around the few enemies and characters we have, and will polish their special attacks. As it is a big part of our game, you will also be able to collect a couple of followers, but most probably that's it. Now this is the difference. We won't polish the special attacks of all 50 playable characters, but only of those we will give the player to play. We won't roll out every system, but only those which will be of importance in terms of the first couple of turns and for understanding the core game loop. Then we will do a little family and friends demo. We will see if everything is fun and if the current systems work and what we should adjust. After that, we can spiral out and create a new iteration. So our minimal lovable product will grow. We can basically make a bigger minimal lovable product. More characters, more enemies, more missions, and more polished systems. That is why you also call this paradigm the spiral model. We will add new layers of systems with every content patch, but we will always have something in case we burn out. For instance, our first version won't contain a blacksmith, but the blacksmith will come with a later update. In comparison, if you try to plan out everything from start and work on it simultaneously, it is very dangerous to just work on the big picture and never find an end. With the spiral model, you will always have small working prototypes which get more and more complex with every iteration. The prototypes there is already an attempt to polish them, so you won't have a big burden at the end to polish everything, because you will do it while you create these outer layers of the spiral. Also, as discussed, the minimal lovable product will give you the opportunity to gain better feedback. If you give it to people, they can comment on what is fun or what is not fun. Now, this is the tricky part. If you, for instance, post a game on itch and it is bad, you might not get a second chance. And even if you improve it by a lot in later iterations, people might still think your game is bad. We are kind of scared of that scenario. So like I said, your minimal lovable product, when shared with the public, should not be too stripped of too many features in my opinion. But if you give it to a smaller hand-picked audience, this should not be too much of an issue. If you guys want to be part of our family and friends demo, then join our Discord, but beware as it will still take a couple of months. So I'm really happy that we have now switched to this scheme of project management, and we will see how things will turn out. But since we haven't published anything yet, I cannot guarantee you that this works. But I have a good feeling about all of that. So guys, thanks a lot for listening. And if you enjoy our vlogs, then subscribe to our channel, wishlist us on Steam, and see you next week. Goodbye.